Alarian Season 1, Infernal Pyre Episode 1, The First Question. The darkness of space stretched endlessly in every direction. For a moment there was only silence. Then, a crimson light emerged. At first it appeared to be nothing more than a distant ember drifting through the void. But as the camera drew closer, the ember grew into something unimaginably vast. Infernal Pyre, the first living world. Its surface burned with enormous rivers of molten stone that carved glowing veins across entire continents. Mountain ranges reached toward the upper atmosphere, their peaks crowned with slow-moving volcanic plumes that painted crimson shadows across the sky. There were no moons above Infernal Pyre, only the burning world itself, alone beneath the light of the Alarian star. The camera continued its descent. The crimson atmosphere shimmered with heat before giving way to the ash seas. Immense rivers of warm volcanic clouds flowing between mountain peaks so vast they seemed to hold up the sky. Then, something impossible emerged from the haze. Entire cities, not built upon the mountains, but floating above them. Colossal platforms of dark volcanic alloy drifted effortlessly upon the ash seas, their foundations glowing softly, where spark crystal systems harmonized with the currents beneath them. Bridges stretched between towering districts. Metallic banners moved gently in the warm wind. Molten waterfalls spilled from engineered channels, disappearing into the cloud layers thousands of meters below. Nothing about the cities suggested chaos. Everything was deliberate. Everything had purpose. The camera glided through one of the great avenues. Life unfolded naturally. Merchants displayed finely woven metallic fabrics that shimmered like silk despite being forged from living alloy. Artisans shaped incandescent metals with remarkable precision. Engineers inspected massive structural supports beneath suspended terraces. Children laughed as they chased one another across elevated walkways, their living flame-like wings flickering instinctively behind them, more expressive than useful. Elsewhere, graceful fiery tails swayed unconsciously with every conversation, every gesture, every emotion. To the Vailori, wings and tails were simply part of life. No one questioned them. No one remembered why they had them. Across the city, Orvun herds lumbered peacefully toward elevated lava channels, guided by experienced herders whose practiced movements reflected generations of trust between civilization and creature. Above everything else stood the Jaithal. Unlike any other structure within the city, it possessed neither the appearance of a palace nor a fortress. Its architecture reflected only one purpose: understanding. Thousands of Vailori walked its halls each day, each following a different path in search of answers that might improve the lives of every generation that followed. The camera entered through enormous obsidian doors. The sounds of the city faded. The atmosphere became quieter, focused, purposeful. Scholars crossed vast halls carrying crystal tablets etched with observations gathered over decades. Researchers debated beneath immense suspended anatomical models. Others documented the behavior of Orvun, while nearby metallurgists compared newly refined living alloys beneath the glow of spark crystals. Among countless brilliant minds, one Vailori barely noticed any of them. Bent over a broad stone table covered with anatomical drawings was a physician named Sailor. He had not looked up in several hours. Before him lay sketch after sketch of the Vailori body, every muscle, every tendon, every bone, and on nearly every page, the wings, the tail, covered with notes, measurements, comparisons, questions. At the center of the latest page, written more heavily than the rest, was a single sentence. If they serve no purpose, why did evolution refuse to erase them? Sailor stared at the words. He had asked the same question for years. He had never found an answer. Outside, Infernal Pyre continued its endless rhythm. Inside the Zaithal, history was quietly preparing to change. Sailor's fingers moved carefully across the page. Another line, another measurement, another comparison. The charcoal paused. His eyes narrowed. Impossible. He reached toward a shelf crowded with anatomical journals, each bound in dark volcanic leather, polished smooth by generations of scholars. One by one, he spread them across the table. Different authors, different centuries, different cities. Every illustration agreed. The musculature of the wings was extraordinarily complex, far more complex than necessary. He traced one bundle of muscle with the charcoal, then another, then a third. They connected far deeper into the shoulders than simple balance could ever require. His gaze drifted toward his own wing. Slowly, almost absent-mindedly, he unfolded it. The living flames shimmered softly in the still air. Beautiful, elegant, completely useless, or so everyone believed. A quiet knock echoed through the chamber. Without looking up, Sailor answered, "Come in." The heavy stone door slid open. A fellow researcher stepped inside carrying several crystal tablets. "You're still here," Sailor continued writing. "I was here yesterday. You were. And the day before." Another mark appeared on the parchment. His colleague sighed. "The evening meal has already begun." "I'm aware. You said that 4 hours ago." "I know. You've forgotten to eat again?" "I'll eat." "When?" Sailor finally looked up. "Eventually." The researcher laughed to himself. "I don't understand how someone capable of remembering every tendon in the body can't remember breakfast." Sailor smiled faintly. "It's a flaw. It's several flaws." The researcher placed the tablets onto the table. "They've completed the latest anatomical survey." Sailor immediately reached for them. His colleague pulled them away. "No!" Sailor blinked. "You eat first." "I can read while I eat." "You won't." "I might." "You absolutely won't." A long silence followed. Finally, Sailor exhaled. "Fine." Together they stepped into one of the great halls of the Zathal. The corridors were alive with movement. Valori of every path crossed beneath soaring obsidian arches. Some carried glowing mineral samples. Others debated animatedly over geological sketches. Farther ahead, a group studying Orvun physiology carefully examined newly shed fragments of living alloy beneath crystal lamps. Knowledge surrounded him. Questions surrounded him. Sailor found them all infinitely more interesting than conversation. As they walked, voices greeted him. "Good morning, Sailor. Your treatment saved my sister." The elder's recovery was remarkable. He acknowledged each greeting politely, humbly. Then, almost immediately, his attention drifted elsewhere. Above one of the corridors hung an ancient anatomical sculpture of the Valori form. His steps slowed. He stared at its wings. Again, his companion noticed. "You've walked beneath that sculpture almost every day for 12 years. "I know. And every single time." Sailor finished the sentence for him. "I wonder why." His friend shook his head, smiling. "I hope one day whatever answer you're searching for is worth all this." Sailor looked at the sculpture one last time. So do I. Neither of them noticed the faint shimmer that briefly passed through the fiery veins of his folded wings. It lasted less than a heartbeat. Gone before either Valori could have seen it. The shimmer was gone. The shimmer was gone. Sailor blinked once. Nothing. He studied his wing for another moment before folding it neatly behind his back. "Strange." His companion looked over. "What is?" Sailor hesitated. "Nothing." The two continued through the great halls of the Zathal. Their footsteps echoed softly beneath immense vaulted ceilings supported by towering obsidian pillars. Light from suspended, spark crystals reflected across polished volcanic stone, casting warm patterns that shifted gently with every passing current of heated air. Ahead, several Valori had gathered around one of the central discussion chambers. As Sailor approached, the conversations quieted, not out of fear, out of expectation. One of the senior pathwalkers stood beside a large geological projection suspended above a circular stone table. Rivers of lava, mountain chains, and active volcanic regions shimmered as the projection slowly rotated. He looked directly at Sailor. "Perfect timing." Sailor inclined his head respectfully. "You wish to see me? I wish to hear whether you've finally abandoned your wings." A few quiet chuckles spread through the room. Sailor smiled politely. "I'm afraid not. I suspected as much." The elder folded his hands behind his back. "Tell me, Sailor, how many generations have walked the Varen?" Sailor answered immediately. 341 documented generations. And in all that time, the elder gestured toward his own folded wings. How many discovered a practical use for these? Sailor remained silent. The elder answered his own question. None. Another scholar stepped forward. We've mapped every muscle, every tendon, every nerve. They contribute slightly to balance, minor emotional expression, and little else. The discussion seemed settled, to everyone except Sailor. He stepped closer to the projection table. Then why are the muscles still so heavily developed? Silence. They consume energy. They require blood flow. They regenerate when damaged. They are inherited without exception. He looked around the chamber. Evolution does not preserve complexity without reason. One researcher sighed. There it is again. "The question," another smiled kindly. "You always assume the universe is hiding another answer." Sailor met his gaze. "What if it is?" The room grew quiet, not because anyone was offended, because no one had an answer. The elder pathwalker eventually broke the silence. "Curiosity built the Zathal." He paused. "But curiosity without discipline can consume a lifetime." He stepped closer. "There is a newly opened fissure in the southern basalt ranges." Sailor listened. "Several Orvoon herders were injured when part of the cavern system collapsed. The local healers have requested assistance." Sailor nodded. "I'll leave immediately." The elder held up a hand. "You weren't my first choice." The words hung in the air. "You were chosen because everyone else is occupied." Another pause, and because. A faint smile crossed the elder's face. "If there truly are geological formations no one has studied before." The entire chamber quietly looked toward Sailor. "We both know you'd go anyway." For the first time that day, Sailor laughed. A genuine laugh. "You know me too well." The elder shook his head. "No, Sailor, I simply know what questions sound like." Minutes later, beneath the great eastern platforms of the city, a transport glider descended through the ash seas toward the volcanic wilderness below. Sailor stood alone near the open observation rail. Beyond the drifting clouds, endless rivers of lava illuminated the mountains beneath him. He had made this journey dozens of times. Today felt no different. He could not have known that before the sun completed its path across Infernal Pyre's sky, he would ask a question no Valori had ever imagined, and receive an answer that would change the course of history. The transport glider descended through layers of crimson cloud with quiet precision. Unlike the great cargo vessels that crossed the ash seas, this craft carried only 4 passengers and little more than medical supplies, geological instruments, and enough provisions for several days away from the city. Its broad alloy wings remained perfectly still, allowing the invisible currents of warm volcanic air to carry it effortlessly between the mountains. Sailor stood near the forward observation window. He rarely traveled without spending most of the journey looking outside. Infernal Pyre was never the same world twice. New lava rivers appeared where old ones had cooled. Fresh volcanic ridges rose from the earth while ancient valleys disappeared beneath glowing stone. To many, the planet was unpredictable. To Sailor, it was simply alive. One of the pilots approached him. "You've been studying the mountains again?" Sailor smiled without turning. "They're changing. They always change." "Exactly." The pilot laughed. "I've flown these routes for 30 years. So have I. You still see things I stopped noticing." Sailor remained silent. Far below, an enormous Orvoon herd slowly crossed a field of cooling basalt. Hundreds of the great creatures lumbered together in remarkable harmony. Their massive armored shells glowed faintly from the heat stored within them, while smaller juveniles remained close to the adults as they approached fresh lava streams. The Valori herders surrounding them moved with practiced confidence. No chains, no cages, only long guiding staffs whose tips emitted gentle pulses of warmth. The Orvoon followed willingly. "They trust us." The words came from behind him. Sailor turned to find the oldest passenger aboard the glider, an experienced field physician whose dark crimson skin bore the faded tattoos of many decades. "They always have." Sailor watched the herd below. "I sometimes wonder who domesticated whom." The older physician chuckled, "Still asking strange questions. I've never managed to stop. I hope you never do." For a while, neither of them spoke. The glider continued its graceful descent. The floating cities were now little more than distant silhouettes against the crimson horizon. Ahead, the land became harsher, sharper. Entire mountain ranges had fractured open, exposing brilliant rivers of molten stone that illuminated the undersides of towering cliffs. Columns of volcanic gas rose silently into the sky. Heat shimmered above the landscape, yet despite the immense power surrounding them, there was peace, no panic, no destruction. Infernal Pyre was simply being itself. A soft chime echoed through the cabin. The pilot's voice filled the compartment. "We're approaching the southern basalt ranges. The fissure lies just beyond the next ridge." As the glider rounded the mountainside, the atmosphere changed. The easy conversation faded. Below them, dozens of Valori had gathered around a collapsed section of volcanic terrain. Medical shelters had already been erected. Several Orvoon stood nearby, strangely restless despite the calm surroundings. One repeatedly turned its head toward the darkness within the newly opened cavern. It refused every attempt to move it away. The elder physician frowned. "That's unusual." Sailor followed the creature's gaze. The cavern beyond was completely dark. No lava glow, no reflected light, just darkness. For reasons he could not explain, he found himself staring back into it.
Hey guys, if you've made it all the way to the end, thank you. My name is Elrin, and this is the very beginning of a universe I've wanted to bring to life for a long time. This channel is dedicated to telling original stories, building new worlds, and creating a universe where every planet has its own history, cultures, mysteries, and stories waiting to be discovered. What you watch today is only the first step. There's so much more to uncover, and I'm excited to share that journey with you one episode at a time. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. It genuinely helps a new creator like me, and it lets you be here from the very beginning as Ilarion grows. I'd also love to hear what you thought about today's episode. What stood out to you? What questions do you have? Leave a comment below, because I'd love to read your thoughts. Thank you for spending your time with me. Until our paths cross again. Welcome to Ilarion.